Hello students, today we're going to talk about gender. So what comes to mind when you hear the word gender? Maybe you think that gender is the same as sex. But actually, these are two separate categories. Gender has to do with socially constructed norms, whereas sex is to do with anatomy. So, what is the difference then? Gender is about the expectations that society has, what society tries to entrust upon you as the kind of expected behavior. Whereas one's biological makeup is what constitutes one's sex. So, how does one really become engendered? How does a human being, whether it's a male or a female, how do they acquire gender? So, gender comes to us through the socialization process. It's something which we are born into because it's all around us. But of course, that does not mean it does not change. So, for instance, when uh, children were small as babies, before we had the textile industry and we had all the dyes, all babies were made to wear white. But now, what do we associate with a boy? If it's a boy, we expect that he would wear blue clothes. We buy blue clothes for a baby boy. But if it's a girl, what has come to be associated with the girl? Usually, it's the color pink. Similarly, how else do do parents or grown-ups indoctrinate children from a very young age, a tender age, when they don't even know what they want, what their preferences are, what they want to play with? The presumption is if it's a boy, he would like to have cars, while if it's a girl, she's supposed to be playing with dolls. So these aren't innate choices. This is not what the baby is asking for, but this is what the parent gives to the child, believing that this is what that child wants. So, uh, gender also is reflected in language. And also what I wrote here was gender equal to sex, but no, that there's a big no for that. These are two separate things. One is biological, while the other is a construct. Now, if you look at gender and language, how is language engendered? So, for instance, when we talk about mankind, we one is supposed to be referring to the whole of humanity. But then why the term mankind? Why not womankind? Or why not humankind? That is what gender theorists, feminists are talking about. This is something which has become more popular, more accepted, that male pronouns should not be used as the universal. They do not represent everyone. So, for instance, instead of saying chairperson, chairman, we now say chairperson. Also, and because of these gender constructions, we come to associate certain professions with certain, with a certain sex. So, for instance, I'll tell you a little riddle sort of a story which will help to bring home the point. So there was a doctor and his child who were, traveling in the car. The car met with an accident. The doctor died on the spot. The child was rushed to the hospital, and at the hospital, the doctor said, "I cannot operate on this child because he is my son." So how come the doctor who died on the road, who was he the father or the doctor at the hospital? Most people are confused, but the simple answer is that the doctor at the hospital was his mother. But one does not associate a woman with being a doctor very readily, even though today things are changing. We do have female doctors, but this is a very recent phenomenon, and our minds are trained not to associate a woman with such a profession. So that's how gender works in insidious ways. It is, ingrained in our minds, not because we believe in that or that there's something, it's an innate truth, but it's because we are surrounded with these gender stereotypes and we come to believe them. How else does gender function? So, for instance, if we talk about a male, we say Mr. So and so. If one writes a letter to a certain person, it's supposed to be Mr. But if it's a female, usually she is referred to either as a Miss or as a Mrs. Why is that so? That's because, again, of the gender difference that society has, imposed upon people. Because a male stands by himself, he is autonomous, he does not need any referential, he does not to be, his identity is not dependent on his marital status. But whereas for females, their existence appears to be very heavily dependent on whether they are married or not. That determines their being. But these things, of course, are changing. People are pointing out to this differential treatment, and it is not as if one is born with, so what is gender do? As I told you, sex is about biological difference. Gender is about saying that men are masculine, whereas women are feminine. But these differences are imposed. The self fulfilling prophecy of telling girls that you're meant to take care of the house, you have to learn certain, so the chores are meant to be done by girls alone. They are meant to be, uh, you know, trained in a certain manner, whereas men are supposed to be strong, they're supposed to be, you know, uh, they're not supposed to cry, or they're supposed to, shoulder responsibilities. That is something which is not, it's not an a priori, it's not something which one is born with. It's something which is taught to you. And when the elders repeatedly tell their children how they're supposed to behave, what the expectations are, the children soon catch up. Okay, so that was an elementary session on gender. I hope you all understood. Thank you.